Hey, everyone. James Azar here for CyberHub Podcast Tech Corner. We've got an awesome episode coming your way today, thanks to our friend over at InterSystems. So make sure you check them out. I'm going to be talking to a very special guest, Joe Lichtenberg, and from InterSystems here in just a moment. But before I do that, just want to tell you first, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, make sure to do so right now. Hit subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, turn on the notification bell. If you're listening on your favorite podcast listening platform, make sure to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. And then most importantly, share this podcast, because that's the best way for you to help grow this podcast and support it. That's why you tune in, because you love it and you want to be a part of it. That's number one. Number two, the Cyber FinTech event on April 27th, 2021, atpcyberfintech.com. Go check it out. Register right now if you're interested in being part of the event. Contact me directly. We have a great event coming your way. This is the first of many podcasts on the road to Cyber FinTech Atlanta 2021, where I will be moderating and hosting the event. I'll be giving a talk as well, so you won't want to miss that. Make sure to tune in, register, sign up right now, get your tickets while they are still available. This is a hybrid event, and there's an in-person part here, right here in Atlanta at the Atlanta Tech Park in beautiful Peachtree Corners, or virtual as well. Either of those will be great. So now, enough with the announcements. Let's get right into the meat and bones of this thing. Are you ready? Time to kick off this week's episode.
From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
All right, folks, I'm back. Joe Lichtenberg. Joe, welcome to this week's Tech Corner.
James, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's great to be.
It's awesome to have you on here. You know, just going through my mind of what I want us to talk about. Like, I don't know that we have enough time on today's show to do that. We're gonna try and fill it, but we'll see. There's a lot of really cool things to talk about on the road to the Cyber FinTech event over at Peachtree Corners, atpcyberfintech.com. If you guys have listened to previous Tech Corners I've done with Robin Bianfi, we talk a lot about fintech and cyber and the intersection of securing our financial system. And InterSystems, you guys aren't really in security, right? You guys are kind of in fintech.
Well, we're deep in data and we're deep in financial services. So absolutely it touches security, obviously. But we have a pretty broad purview in the financial services space. So, typically the company, so first of all, we're a software company. So we're an enterprise data management software company. And the types of applications that we are typically involved with our clients are where there's a lot of data and data coming from a lot of different sources. So we see that now a lot with large financial services organizations, where they just have tons of data from different sources that they need to be able to harmonize and work with for a wide variety of different types of initiatives. That's really where we play.
I love that. So tell our audience a little bit about your background and your a little bit about your role in InterSystems.
Sure. So I run global product and industry marketing for our data management software products. And I've spent my career in this space. And so that, in a short description means understanding what our customers are trying to do in terms of their business initiatives and helping them do that by leveraging technology and best practices and so forth.
So let's start talking a little bit about financial services. So a lot of people in cybersecurity, we look at financial services as being probably the most cybersecurity mature industry of them all, right? That, when it comes to money, spare no dollar defending $1, right?
Totally.
And obviously, financial services are antiquated, sometimes very legacy systems. And I don't want to get into that aspect of it, but it's important to kind of note that, because you guys aren't about let's do a digital transformation. You're more about how do we, rather than break apart, kind of do it kind of wiser, right? Kind of use data and use technology to really leverage what you have going on. If we talk a little bit about the risk management aspect of it for just a moment, financial services deals with a lot of compliance. So how does all of that how does data start to deal with compliance, and how do you guys what are some of the use cases you can talk about?
Yeah, so there's a lot there to unpack. So absolutely around enterprise risk management, many different types of compliance initiatives, but also you did mention digital transformation. And we're involved in a lot of those initiatives as well. So it probably makes sense to spend some time talking about that as well. One of the biggest initiatives right now that we're seeing is around enterprise risk, enterprise liquidity management. And the reason for that is that, especially in larger organizations, it's really hard.
Right.
Because there's so many different parts of the business. And, not only can the business be siloed, but their tech stacks are siloed as well. So you have a lot of different data and you have a lot of different activities going on. Especially, now what we've seen in the last couple of weeks or so, where the volatility, we've always seen volatility spikes, right? They happen from time to time. They're unexpected. But now in terms of pricing, so if you look at what happened, in the last couple of weeks, and then again yesterday somehow with GameStop. So I thought that was over, but apparently it's not.
It's just getting started.
Hit 400, and then it was, I thought the shakeout was done. And it was down at 40, but yesterday, for whatever reason, it spiked up to, 150 again. So, being able to have accurate and real-time visibility across all of the different parts of the bank, and not end of day, but, you don't want to get, a margin call, being blindsided. If you have a position in some part of the bank. So we're seeing more and more around both real-time risk management and liquidity management, as well as applying machine learning and AI so that you can have better sort of predictive scenario modeling in terms of the kinds of things that may happen. So it's interesting. We just did a survey where we sponsored a survey and we interviewed 100 different chief data officers across 100 different large banks globally around the world. And fully 40% of the budgets around data management are being applied towards compliance activities and internally facing risk activities. So it's still consuming a significant part of the budget. And even with that, 50% of the compliance initiatives are still handled manually. So there's still a lot of work that is being done there.
50% are still done manually?
Still done manually. Yeah. And even with the, all the effort that is being put into it, and the significant part of the budget, almost half the budget, is still being applied to that. So it does leave, in theory, about half of the budget for more strategic change the bank initiatives, but it's still, significant effort around, enterprise level risk and liquidity modeling and management.
Yeah, so that brings up a very interesting topic, right? Which is, when things are done manually, there tends to be a little bit more mistakes and challenges than, let's say, an automated process. And the number you just gave, 50% of all compliance being done manually. How does that really slow down an organization? In your experience, have you seen that really kind of hinder progress rather than really promote innovation?
It's slow and it's error prone, both, right? So, it'd be interesting to talk about what we see around digital transformation. So, admittedly, I sort of hate to throw out the term digital transformation because everybody,
right, because it's a buzzword. It's
an
an overly used buzzword,
and you
right?
can apply it to everything. But what we see, and again, I would preface, all of this with, our purview is based on, the kind of services that we provide. So, our technology is around, it's a modern data platform where it combines modern integration capabilities using APIs and API management and orchestration and integration, data integration, application integration, database management to be able to process data on demand, but also the analytics capabilities associated with it. And then lots of analytics, whether it's machine learning or business rules or BI and so forth, right, into this modern data platform. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of this next generation that we're seeing around data fabrics as well, which is sort of the next generation of integration and data lakes and data warehouses and so forth. And so it's what it's evolved into. But in terms of your question and digital transformation, what we see a lot is working with the systems that you already have in place and exposing the systems as endpoints and using APIs and orchestration to streamline processes that may only be partially automated or not automated at all, and automating and streamlining these processes. So, sort of step one is to expose the endpoints. Step two is to start to streamline these sets of functions or processes to get rid of manual steps. And then as a byproduct, you can start to take this data, right? Because part of this integration process is making sure that the data is transformed so that it's in a consistent format. So if you can store that off, now it's just a byproduct of this automation that you're doing. You start to have, the harmonized historical data, which is really where the value is, right? I mean, everybody's interested in data. So if I can start to, by default, capture this data and use it now for analytics and start to get smarter, both in terms of decision support, but also in terms of building models, whether it's business rules or whether it's machine learning models, and embedding those back into the processes to make them smarter. That's sort of the future of where all these organizations are trying to get to. So whether it's applying that to compliance activities or internal functions, or applying it externally for customer experience and streamlining customer onboarding and things like that, we're seeing a lot of traction around that right now. So I think your question was around, if you have gaps in your compliance activities, what does that mean? And so absolutely, in terms of inefficiencies and errors and, having to apply manual processes and using folks and inconsistencies, absolutely. But starting to streamline those processes and getting rid of those manual workflows and those manual steps, from our perspective, that's a big initiative that's going on right now.
So that you bring up a great little aspect of that, which is, let's talk about trust in data for a little bit, because I think that's really important. Oftentimes, data is one not very trustworthy for multiple reasons. One, the way the data is formatted. Like as an example, the way some people write, if state isn't a selected field and it's a filled out field, then the same state could be written in 4, 5, 6, 7 different variants, which hinders the trust in data, because you can write Georgia in a small g and a small a big G and a small a, capitals all the way across, small letters, I mean, people write stuff which creates challenges in data, creates challenges in being able to really properly analyze your data. But the trust in data is significant, especially in financial services. And a lot of organizations don't really understand the concept of trust in data. So can you explain the whole term of trust in data and what that really means? And then what do organizations, let's start with that. Let's explain the term and then we'll get into that aspect. So I won't do a loaded question this time.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge and a huge initiative right now. And so especially, in the purview of chief data officers. So as you say, there's a tremendous amount of data. And there's obviously data that's duplicated with different taxonomy and different metadata and so on and so forth. And so, in large part, the purview of the chief data officer is to be able to provide data that's trustworthy to the organization. So what does that mean? So one is around data lineage, right? So where did the data come from? And what's happened to the data from the time that it left the source system to the time that it's going to be used inside the organization for some purpose, right? So that's around data lineage. There's a data catalog, which is around, can I find the data, right? What data do I have? Am I allowed to use it, right? So certain data, may be allowed to be used by certain people in the organization or certain parts of the organization, but not in others. Or, data may be available, but certain fields, you may need to mask for privacy reasons and so forth. And then trust is also, highly correlated with the metadata. So, for example, the data may be a month old, right? So if it's the price of GameStop stock, it's useless. If it's about, a mortgage loan, then month-old data may be fine, right? So all of these issues around data, can I trust it? Where did it come from? What's happened to it since it's left the source systems? And who's allowed to use it? Where can I use it? And then there's also a lot of work around upstream visibility of the data, the kinds of things that we talked about, so data lineage, but also downstream use of the data. So if I'm at the enterprise data level in the organization, I want visibility into where the data is being used across the organization. That's also a hard problem to solve.
So when you talk about that, let's talk about chain of custody of data, especially from a compliance standpoint, right? A lot of regulators and auditors, you talk about data lineage. I like to talk about the data chain of custody, which is not only where did it originated, but how many systems did it touch along the way, and then where were all those systems? And especially in a world of interconnections, right, of APIs, of integrations, right, the chain of custody of data can be very, very, very confusing. What are some ways to really kind of get a hold of your chain of custody of data to be able to really kind of understand the process of data and then where it goes and how it gets there overall, like in general, kind of being able to map that out?
That is one of the biggest enterprise initiatives that we're seeing that we get involved with across major financial services organizations. And the larger the organization, the more of an initiative it is. And it has visibility at the highest levels of the organization. So, I mean, you've really hit on, a vein of where there's, tremendous effort being put in right now. So, I wish there was an easy answer for it. You go install X and you're done and it solves all your problems. But there's a fair amount of work that's being done. I want to talk about what Gartner now is calling the future of data management. And it's called a data fabric. And a data fabric is something that, by the way, you can't go buy. It's a reference architecture. And it addresses all of these initiatives that we're talking about. So it's trust in data. So can I find the data? What's the upstream, the lineage associated with the data? What's the downstream data? Where is it being used? As well as you get to that next level below sort of the metadata and the relationships. And it also handles the heavy lifting around data integration and data processing and persistence and API management, data transformation and data quality, being able to build API-driven streamlined processes. Analytics we haven't talked about, right? So especially in the context of what data are you going to use, especially now in terms of where analytics is going. So there's, clearly a lot of work that's done around, I build the models, I build the dashboards, I know what data is being used, right? That's a fairly solvable problem. But there's a lot more being done now around, number one, sort of business user self-service or relational OLAP, where if I'm close to the business, right, I'm probably among the best to be able to do data exploration, right? I know what the business needs, I understand the data, and so give me access to the data itself and let me go and explore the data and see what data I need to answer the questions that I need. So is a customer going to churn? I don't know, but I know that's a problem in the business, right? And so I want to go, and I could have hundreds or thousands of different variables. So let me go and start to explore the data and see what's relevant and try to figure that out, right? So as I'm navigating through the data, right, how do I know what data I have available to me? Is it trustworthy data and so forth? So it compounds the problem and it makes it harder. So this whole new reference architecture around a data fabric, and by the way, we're highly involved in these enterprise data fabric initiatives and these smart data fabric initiatives. They start to address some of these requirements around what data do I have? Can I trust the data? What data should I be using? And then from a downstream standpoint, how do I have visibility into how my data is being used across the organization?
Yeah, so that's so when you look at data, so you talked a little bit, you touched on data analytics. Kind of want to go down that route for just a moment, because on the data analytics side, I'm a big fan as a security guy of defense in depth, but I'm also in data-driven defense. So Roger Grimes wrote a book about data-driven defense, and I think it's a very, very important book because it brings up the whole idea of it brings up over the whole idea of you want to have as much data as you possibly can as you're building your security program, but we need as much data as well in order to really properly build our architecture and infrastructure and understand what data we're getting, how we're getting that data, and all of that. So when we look at data analytics as a general rule of thumb, and I kind of talked about that a little bit ago with the idea of how some people write names or states or phone numbers or countries, which creates a challenge in data analytics, because if I'm trying to get a data set from a compliance perspective, my filters and my search fields are going to be across multiple different variations, which create a inconsistency in my data, and especially in that chain of custody of that data. So what are some of the ways where you can leverage, like I said, like data fabric and smart data fabric, but also with data analytics in order to really give effective real-time data to decision makers?
Yeah. So, there's a saying that 80% of data science is around data wrangling, and the other 20% is complaining about data wrangling. So, without clean, healthy, harmonized data, you're not going to get accurate results from your analytics, especially around machine learning, where, the way that, as we know, the way that machine learning works is you feed it lots of data, and then it will, go and determine, what the, appropriate models are. So rather than, creating the algorithm and giving it the data, you give it the data and, sort of out comes the model. So our, it's an interesting question. So our heritage is all around, what we call healthy data. And so a natural extension of that is the work that we're doing with our customers around machine learning, for exactly that reason. So, data transformation and bringing data from multiple sources, because, a lot of the value that comes out of the analytics is when you combine data from different sources to get, new sort of perspectives on your business problems. So number one, having a lot of data and having the tools in place to be able to make that data consistent is critical. And I mean, there's a lot of really powerful, technologies available to do that. Of course, we're one with, InterSystems Iris data platform. But, there's a lot of, very powerful technologies to allow you to be able to do that. Then next is around, especially for machine learning, around feature engineering. So, there's feature engineering and feature selection. Feature engineering, you want to create a lot of these machine learning features to understand which are the ones that, from a sensitivity analysis standpoint, which are the ones that are going to be most influential, most relevant in terms of giving you the result that you want. So is the transaction fraudulent? Does it have a high likelihood of being fraudulent? Does this customer have a high likelihood of churning, right? Which are the products that I can offer to this customer to increase my share of wallet, and so forth, right? So I may have, thousands or tens of thousands of potential features, right? So I may not know which are the ones that are going to be most relevant. So I really need powerful, sort of data transformation, feature modeling tools to be able to do that. But then at some point, I want to pare those way back, because the contradiction is, even though I may want to consider a lot of data for my models, the best accuracy comes from actually having the smaller number of features that I use in feature selection for the model. So all of that is around data. So being able to pull together data in very large quantities from multiple sources, and then have the flexibility to perform the feature modeling. So for example, I may have one field that is US states. Okay, so your first issue is, it could say Massachusetts, it could say MA, it could say MASS. right? So I have to, that's a data quality thing. So I have to address that, right? Then from a feature engineering standpoint, most models will not accept one column that has, the state Massachusetts or New Hampshire or New York in it. I then need to expand that into 50 different fields for all 50 states, and 49 columns, if you will have zeros and one will have a 1. So that flexibility is critical. The other thing that you mentioned is around real time. And I'm glad you brought that up. So that's a huge initiative right now. So, more and more, we're seeing the push to near real time and real time for a lot of these initiatives around liquidity, around risk, not just around fraud detection and things like that. So if you go back to the GameStop example, right? I mean, I need in my organization real-time visibility into what my risk profile is if I'm, carrying equity or options associated with that, right? Because the volatility is so extreme right now. So there's really a push to real time, and it would be interesting maybe to talk about how some of the previous technology approaches like data warehouses and data lakes, while they provided value, they still have significant limitations, especially around real time, and in the case of data lakes, being able to have a consistent metadata layer across all this data so that it was usable. But clearly, in terms of real time, right? That's where a real-time enterprise data fabric, where you're pulling data on demand as you need it, addresses a lot of these issues, and it's helping companies be, much more near real-time and real-time in a lot of these internally facing and externally facing initiatives.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting kind of approach when you look at a lot of people that started looking at data lakes ended up kind of almost walking away from some of them simply because of the complexity of the lake itself. True. And then the cost isn't very the cost sometimes doesn't make sense for the trouble. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right? When you look at existing infrastructure, and people tend to want to or dismiss existing infrastructures, but these infrastructures have been around for decades, and they've survived all these decades. You don't take down the Empire State Building because it's old, or you don't take down the Brooklyn Bridge because it's old, and it's great infrastructure that was built at an amazing engineering feature for its time. And so
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. We are very rarely involved in rip and replace initiatives. We're much more augment the infrastructure that you already have in place, unless there's a reason to pull it out, right? I mean, and there are initiatives where organizations want to modernize a particular piece of their infrastructure, and we'll go in and then we'll just give them an API, and we'll run things in parallel for a while, and then they'll decommission it if they can modernize and bring costs down. But but that is, so we do that. But that aside, exactly what you said. And so data lakes, and in many of these larger financial services organizations, it's not just one data lake; it's multiple data lakes. So they have a data lake in wealth management, and they have a data lake in core banking, and so forth. And so that becomes just another data source, right? So if you're building up an enterprise data fabric, you want to pull data from multiple sources where there's real-time data and non-real-time data. And most of the data lakes that we see are batch data. It's just historical data. They're storing all the data in S3 or some other mechanism. There is data there, but the usefulness can be limited. So pulling the data from there, but also pulling data from data warehouses, from core banking systems and so forth, and creating this enterprise data fabric, or this enterprise data layer, with a common metadata layer and common governance and transformation rules, so that if I need to combine data, for analytics or for streamlined processes and so forth, I have this, clean, healthy, harmonized data layer that I can pull from it. And under that, the underlying sources that it's pulling from maybe or typically exactly the things that you just described. So your legacy infrastructure. I mean, a legacy infrastructure that's been running for years, it's in large part, it's not going away.
No, and again, it's like I said, you don't replace the Empire State Building because
Right.
we build buildings better today, right? You're able to kind of look at building in a different building, but you're not really going to take down the Empire State Building.
There's a lot of value there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I feel like a lot of people in technology, but have a tendency of like rip and replace. And I sit on several boards in the financial services and FinTech world. And when we do our meetings and, the CTOs or CIOs or CDOs come in and they're pitching us these, rip and replace projects, it creates
it's like open heart surgery.
Well, so there are times where open heart surgery is needed, but if you speak to any really good cardiologist, they'll tell you that's our last option. We're going to try 50 different things before we put you on an operating table, because once we open you up, we don't control anything anymore. There's a plethora of things that can happen that can impact the plan to do this set surgery. And that same thing applies here, right? That same thing applies here. And most folks don't really get that. And
yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting challenge of our time right now, which is the digital transformation buzzword, but really the cloud migration, the idea of multi-cloud environments, of upgrading the challenges of building your infrastructure to be able to accommodate an unprecedented amount of users through mobile devices over the different connection points, creates in a global market and in a global field where every organization no longer thinks local but thinks global, creates a level of challenge that's really fun to solve. And I mean fun to solve, because you've got to put together so many bits and pieces, and you've got to upgrade, and you've got to look at it. And it's not as just simple as rip and replace. And I was on a call last week where we had to talk someone off the ledge of rip and replace, or just like, we get it, we get the challenges, but the idea of rip and replace, you're going to open a can of worms that you're not prepared for. And the person who's selling you this isn't prepared for either. They're just looking at their sales quota. They're not really looking to be a partner.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. It depends on the problem that they're trying to solve or the initiative. So, when it comes to, I'll throw out the buzzword again, but when it comes to digital transformation, we don't see it as rip and replace. We see it as opening up the endpoints and streamlining processes using public and private APIs. If it's internally facing, it's private APIs, and orchestrating the services and microservices. And so it's not about rip and replace at all. It's about just streamlining the processes using the existing legacy infrastructure that you have in place. If you're a startup FinTech, you have the luxury of being able to start from scratch. So, it's sort of a non-issue at all. Around, enterprise liquidity and risk and compliance and KYC and BCBS 239 and FRTB and so forth. it's not about rip and replace. It's about, implementing, sort of this data fabric where you have access to, data and all of the things that we talked about in terms of lineage and trust and governance and security and so forth. But there are scenarios where organizations need to rip and replace. I'll give you an example that we did for one of our major clients. So they're a major global investment bank. And about 10 years ago, so, obviously the market spikes from time to time. And so their trading platform would have delays and outages when the market spiked. And it was really hurting them from a credibility standpoint with their enterprise clients that they were processing trades for, but it was also costing them a lot of money. I think it was like $100,000 per minute of downtime, and so that had to be a rip and replace. And it's interesting. So that was a deal that we closed actually about 10 years ago. I think 2008 when the market spiked, which I remember painfully back in 2008 when that happened. Although the market seems to have recovered since then. So they, the person who was the director of order management technology was pushed aside, and they brought in somebody else. And his first order of business was to fix that. And so they went out and they looked at different architectures and they looked at different technology providers. And so they selected us, and they've been using InterSystems technology ever since. But the way that we did that implementation is we gave them an API, and we built the next generation trading platform side by side. They ran it in parallel, obviously. And then at the point in time when they were confident to turn off their legacy system and run all the trades through us, then they did that. So, I mean, there are clearly scenarios where rip and replace and modernizing technology, either for performance reasons or reliability or cost or things like that, are required. So we do see both.
Absolutely. Joe, we're almost out of time. So here's the deal, folks. What I just said earlier that Joe just answered, right? We're going to talk a lot more about that at the Cyber FinTech event on April 27th. Go to atpcyberfintech.com, atpcyberfintech.com. InterSystems, one of the supporters of the event, will be there. You'll be able to chat with Joe and his team. But one of the things, I like to highlight at events is the idea that we don't want to be highlighting problems without bringing solutions, but we also want to talk about the fun of solving some of the stuff that goes on within those challenges. And that's going to be the highlight of the event. We're going to have great speakers like Ross Young, the CISO over at Caterpillar Financial, Ron Green, the CISO over at MasterCard, Ken Foster from Fiserv. I'm forgetting all the awesome speakers. I'll be there. And really, if I'm there, then everyone else should be there, because, it's going to be awesome. But Joe, thank you so much for coming on and talking a little bit about this. And I know we're going to be talking a lot more about this in the weeks leading up to the event on April 27th.
Thank you, James, so much. This was really fun. I enjoyed it, and you made it that way, so I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you and seeing everybody at the event coming up.
Yeah, it's gonna be a blast. The event is a hybrid event in person here in Peachtree Corners at the Atlanta Tech Park, in cooperation with CyberHub Summit, Atlanta Tech Park, and partnership with Gwinnett. So it's going to be a very, very fun event, folks. We'll have a virtual, so you'll still be able to be part of the festivities virtually. Go to atpcyberfintech.com to get all the details and all the information. This is just one part of our road to Cyber FinTech April 2021, making the comeback to in-person events. Wow, the comeback. It's starting. It's kind of like data migration and data integrity, right? We're making a comeback, and virtual events are going to slowly be a thing of the past, hopefully within the next 6 months.
I hope.
Yeah, I miss the days where people used to come to my house for podcasts. It was a lot of fun. But that's it for us here, folks. Joe with InterSystems, thanks so much for your support. Thank you for being part of the event. Folks, we'll be back with another awesome Tech Corner next week. You'll want to make sure the road to cyber fintech starts here. So you'll want to tune in to that. Until then, have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much for tuning in. My name is James Azar, signing off. Till then, folks, stay cyber safe.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends and colleagues. And get all the latest information at cyberhubpodcast.com.